All right, everybody. So in this lesson, we are doing the Osprey engine fire. Now, one of the reasons I saved it for last is not just because it's the money shot of this course and it's probably one of my favorite shots, but also because if you followed the lessons until now, you know how to set this up. And that's really my whole goal of this course is if you got to this point, there's nothing about this that we haven't covered. And with just a little bit of effort, you should be able to set this up. So we have a regular grid, we have a regular source emitting fuel, we are igniting the fuel, generating the smoke. Then I just played with the shader to get the color that I wanted of the fire, all of which we have covered many times over in this course. So this is what it looks like in Max, and I know that only a small percentage of you will actually do this, but I want to encourage you one more time with this specific example to pause the video. You can open the project file if you want, just so that you have the Osprey model in there, and then try and do the setup on your own, because that will really prove to you that you have learned something from this course. And you can look at an effect like this in a movie or even in the real world, and you can say to yourself, okay, I probably know how I would set this up. I might have to tweak the settings a few times, I might have to run the simulation a few times until it looks good, but I have an idea of how to make this effect. And that's really the best thing that you can walk away with, is the confidence to know that, okay, I know how to do stuff like this now. I know that I just need a source, I need to make a grid, I know how to tweak the fuel settings, how to tweak the dynamic settings, and I can make this look good. So for those of you who will do that, please message me, DM me. I would love to talk to you, see your results, see what you got out of this course. But if you're feeling unsure, absolutely no problem. We are going to set this up from scratch right now. All right, so I'm starting with a blank scene in Max. With this lesson, the Osprey model is included with the project files because I modeled it myself. So feel free to open that up and work with the same model as me. I am working in units, centimeters. 1 unit is 10 centimeters. So first, I want to define the area that's going to be on fire with that polygon ID technique. So I know that I want the engine to be on fire. So I'm just going to select this engine and go under polygon. And you can see that I already have this area selected. So just to show you, basically, I would just select this area because that's what I want to burn. And I would set it to ID 10. So then, as you can see, the Osprey is animated to just sort of fall down. And in the movie Transformers 3, it happens in slow motion. So I actually animated it in slow motion. So it's just moving slower. The rotors are spinning slow, and then I just lowered the time scale for the fire simulation to match the speed of the plane. Because when I first did this, the plane was slow, but the fire was too fast and it didn't match. So I had to play with the time scale to get that right. But for now, basically, you can just set a few keyframes. I just made a dummy to control the plane, and I have it just going down and rotating a little bit, and then I animated the rotors spinning. So pretty simple. Next up, let's make a source like we did many times in this course, and let's just make the engine itself our source. I'm gonna set the outgoing velocity to 300 centimeters, and as before, we can disable temperature and smoke and enable fuel. And I'm just gonna give you the numbers at this point because we've gone over all of this so many times. So I'm just gonna say 1.7 for fuel, which I know is exactly what gave me this result here. And we need to set the polygon ID to 10. Next, let's make a fire grid. And I basically just wanna cover the engine with the grid. So you can do something pretty small. And we're gonna use the adaptive grid for the grid to just expand over time. And let's enable adaptive grid by smoke and give it a threshold of 0.01 with a margin of 5. Let's enable maximum expansion. This is where you want to think about what the shot will be. So I know that the plane's gonna basically fly into the shot like this and then disappear. So I don't really care what happens up top. So I'm just gonna cut it off with the maximum expansion, so we can just maybe make that something like this. Now for my final cell size resolution that gave me this result here, I did 4 centimeters. Looking at it now, I probably could do even more to get even more detail, but I knew that most people would just watch it on YouTube like this, in which case the resolution is just fine. But for now, maybe let's do something like 7. I did 0.25 for the time scale, so it's 1/4 of real-time speed. So this is something that I had to tweak for a while. You know, I started with 0.7 and then I did 0.5, and then in the end I settled at 0.25. Which I felt like matched the movement of the plane the best as far as the speed, just to get that slow motion look. I did 0.25 for cooling as well. So just to recap, cooling will basically cool down the temperature over time. And since we are shading the fire based on temperature, this is basically how you will control how long the flames will last. So I wanted the flames not to be all the way up here, but I also didn't want them to burn off right here, right? I wanted this nice fire trail. So I tweaked the cooling a little bit to get there. Now, as far as the vorticity, I actually wanted a lot of vorticity. I wanted, you know, to see this turbulent smoke. I wanted it to be affected by the rotors. So I did 1 for smoke surface vorticity, and I did 1 for large scale. And temperature surface, I left where it was. Then you can do PCG symmetric with I did 80 for quality for my final, but let's do 40 for now. And steps per frame, you would think that you would need a lot of steps per frame because the rotors are going through the fire pretty fast. However, since we are doing a lower time scale, you actually can get away with just 1 step per frame just fine because we're actually doing slow motion, so it compensates for the speed. Under fuel, let's enable burning. Let's do 290 for ignition temperature. I did 10 for energy. Fuel depletion, I did 3.5. So this works in conjunction with the cooling. So if I wanted that fuel to burn out faster and have the flames not last as long, I could increase the fuel depletion. So I ended up at 3.5 to get this kind of a look here. You can leave smoke amount at 1, smoke threshold, we can do 1. And propagation, I only did 0.2, so almost nothing. So again, propagation is the explosiveness of the fuel. Maybe it might look nicer if we did something like 0.5, just to make some of these flames sort of explode out more. But I wanted a specific look based on the movie, so 0.2 is what I did for that. Everything else is standard, so preview, GPU preview output, let's output fuel and velocity. And with all of these settings in place, let's run the sim. All right, so the simulation is running. It's running pretty fast because the resolution is low. One thing I want you to be aware of is that I actually wanted more interaction of the smoke with the rotors. I wanted you to be able to see how the rotors are pushing the smoke to the side. So I actually right-clicked on the rotor itself, go to Phoenix FD properties, and I increased the motion velocity effect from 1 to 1.5. So this again will give the smoke, you can see it here, right? The rotor is pushing the smoke and giving it rotation based on its movement. I love that effect. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And while this is running, we can go into the shader settings. So let's go under rendering, volumetric options, and maybe for the smoke color, I would just give it something much darker again. So let's do almost black. And then you can go under the smoke opacity and maybe give it something like 0.8 just to get that thick smoke. Already that's starting to look pretty good. Even at low res, this looks pretty good. And then under fire, and actually it's getting kind of slow to work with, so I'm gonna pause the sim. And let's set the fire multiplier to 10. And I'm gonna bring up this curve to bring out a lot of that fire in there. Maybe make a few points in here to add some contrast. All right, and then same as before, I would just play with the shader a little bit. All right, looks good. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe we can make the lower temperatures a bit more red. So I'm just gonna maybe push this more into the red color here and move these around one more time to see. You see, I'm really just trying to make the edges of the flames sort of more red while the middle is more yellow. All right, so I'm happy with the fire shader. So if I just scrub through, you can see this is what it looks like. It's pretty low res, but I can tell we're getting a good amount of fire. Everything seems to look good. So at this point, I would just go back under grid and stop the simulation, make the cell size 4 centimeters like I did before, and let's run the simulation one more time. So let me pause this, and I just want to show you what I did for the lighting. So I'm just gonna unhide my standard V-Ray sun that I have in there. So it's just basically lit from the back by this sun just to get this nice reflection in the Osprey. And I did my standard rendering settings that I showed you before. So I would probably do 4 maximum subdiffs for final render, and then you could do maybe 2000 subdiffs for the light cache, change the resolution. I render everything as .exr, and that's about it. Feel free to open the project file and dig through the settings. Really, it didn't take me that long to do this. The only thing that took a while was figuring out the time scale. So like I said, I started at time scale 1 and it was too fast. So I went back and I ended up at 0.25 for the time scale, but everything else is pretty simple settings that we've covered many times in this course. So I hope this only shows you that there's really nothing to be afraid of when it comes to doing these sims. You really just want to get something going as fast as you can, as far as just put the source in there, put the grid in there, run the sim. You know, don't think about it too much, and then as soon as you have something happening, it's all about just going back and tweaking the settings until you get the desired effect. So we still have one more major lesson of the building collapse left, and then I have a few quick bonus lessons that I want to show you. But I really hope that you guys are enjoying this, and I'll see you in the next one.